Ready for your weekly tech fix? Want to know how technology sets us free? Well, get ready because here it comes. Tired of boring specials about history, science, and technology? Then get on your best headphones because you might want to lay down for this. A Sovryn Tech special with the world's foremost anarchist technophile, Brian Sovryn. He has a huge, well, you know. And now, here's Brian.
That's right, the Golden Stallion here for you with a double load this weekend. And I know how everybody loves a good double load of Sovryn Tech. Ready to spill the seed of liberty. Actually, you know what? Well, I guess in some way this is going to set you free, but I kept promising this, and so I finally want to deliver it. And it's just going to be, a pretty simple podcast about podcasting and what exactly I do, my process and how I make Sovryn Tech what it is. Of course, the initial obligatory statement that really Sovryn Tech is nothing without people that want to listen to it. So thank you so much, as always, for everyone that does listen to it. You are numbering in the hundreds now, so and I really, really appreciate it. And hopefully the show will just keep on growing. But if you are interested in doing your own podcast, or if you're looking for some little tips, I threw this. I'm going to throw this together, and we're just going to run with it. And I'm going to, and I'll give you more than what I actually do, because I've actually gone through quite a few different processes in creating Sovryn Tech. Like I've tried different things. Like I tried using Google Plus quite a bit, to try and promote the show to an international audience. That didn't really work, at least not yet. I mean, maybe Google Plus is something where its time is just, it has to come yet, and it hasn't. But, there's a lot of different things I've tried. So we'll talk about what hasn't worked, what has worked so far. And I want to say right off the bat that I really like things to be pretty simple and elegant, and I like things to, just not to take as little time as possible. Now, I know plenty of people that, that work in audio production in some form or another, and I mean, they are absolute perfectionists, and it shows. And you can tell that the product they deliver, is nothing less than the best. Now, while I'm kind of a perfectionist in thought, I guess, I don't want anything going out there that I'm not proud of, certainly. Admittedly, Sovryn Tech itself, I don't do a lot of editing. It's very, very rare that I do an edit. Exceptionally, exceptionally rare. And part of that is the time frame. I'm an incredibly busy guy. No doubt about it, in the work that I do for Free Talk Live, in the work that I do for myself. And, in that, I don't have a whole lot of time. And I think that if I did want to go and edit a lot of the ums and the uhs out of Sovryn Tech, that, it would take far too much time than I have. That in mind, I want to start off with what exactly, what was my intent of style when I started Sovryn Tech, which was over a year ago now. Yeehaw. My style was, I wanted it to sound like, I wanted it to be conversational. I wanted it to be like you and I are walking down the street, New York City, wherever, and we're just talking. That's the style. That's how I wanted it to be delivered, because there's lots of people who put together tremendous podcasts. Three I can think of in particular would be like Complete Liberty, School Sucks, and Let's Talk Bitcoin, who all happen to have really some of the smartest people on the planet, in my opinion, at the helm of those. Wes Bertrand, Brett Venat, and of course the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy. And as far as those go, of course, Adam Levine does a lot of the editing for Let's Talk Bitcoin. But those are heavily, heavily edited, and they are just brought to a level of perfection that just impresses me to no end. But, I think in bringing it to that level of perfection, now there's a place for that. I'm not saying that's bad that they bring it to a level of perfection. How is that bad? My point is that that's not really what I wanted to bring out. I wanted it to be, again, very conversational, very personal. I didn't want to, Sovryn Tech is information packed, no doubt about that, right? But I wanted it to be quite a few different things for myself. I wanted Sovryn Tech to be kind of a mental exercise for me. And that's why I don't actually, I don't have Wikipedia in front of me when I do Sovryn Tech. I have the story that I'm reading, and that's about it. I don't even really have a whole lot in the way of notes. There may be something like something in particular I want to bring up, but that'll be like a one-sentence affair, that I'll have typed up, in a Google Doc or something that I'll have in front of my face, and that's about it. And so it was kind of a mental exercise for me to do, is to have this conversation and just to keep my brain fresh. And it's a good way to do that, right? It's not catharsis. I'm not doing it for therapy, but it is a good way to exercise the brain, because I have to call upon all these facts, all this knowledge, all this history, and all this tech. I got to pull it from my brain, and sometimes I get things wrong. That's sort of that's the thing. Like, you take Complete Liberty, or you take like School Sucks, and their facts are just perfectly on the level, 100% checked, the whole business. So sometimes I can screw up, no doubt about it. And I'll usually, a listener will email me and they will talk to me about it. And I'll say, oh yeah, absolutely. And then I'll make the correction on the show. But fortunately, it's pretty rare that I screw up, fortunately. So anyway, so that was kind of the intent, is that I wanted that nice conversation. And as far as, okay, why did I do a tech podcast? I did a tech podcast because it was something I wanted to do, a podcast for LRN.FM. And I wanted to do something that, wasn't available yet. Because there's kind of this running meme, and I assume the people listening to this are listening, okay, how can I do a Liberty-themed podcast? So that's where I'm kind of addressing this, though a lot of this information could be used for anything. It doesn't have to be Liberty-themed. But I wanted to do something different, because there's sort of this running meme, running joke in New Hampshire in particular, though I'm sure it happens all over the place, where they say that really every podcast that goes out is just a copy of Free Talk Live. Now, you take examples like Let's Talk Bitcoin, School Sucks, even Pork Therapy, or Complete Liberty. None of those do they in any way mimic Free Talk Live, in my opinion. But apparently there's a lot that do. I think there's shows out there, not so much that copy Free Talk Live, but I've heard at least a couple shows that I think copy Pork Therapy. Like just outright. They copy Pork Therapy, which I have to say, that was another, as far as like inspirations. Why did I even want to get into podcasting? One of my inspirations was when I lived in New York, and I heard Pork Therapy. I just said to myself, oh, holy shit, nobody else is saying this stuff. This is amazing, and I really, I'm a huge fan of the show still. And fortunately for the past while, I've actually been able to sit in on the recordings, or even be, of course, the great honor was that I got to be, a guest co-host on it every once in a while. And, with that in mind, I was like, okay, yes, podcasting, what that allows for is that allows for your unique opinion and your unique evolution as an individual to be able to be expressed. And I thought that was so great. So, I have a large tech background for quite a few reasons. I've worked for tech companies. I've watched tech companies for a while. As an investor and other things. So, and I'm a fan of tech. I'm a dork. I'm a geek, a nerd, pick your word. So it was a perfect fit. And I do have a unique perspective on tech, in my opinion. So it just worked out. And LRN.FM did not have a tech show yet. As far as I know, there was no Liberty show at the time that was tech themed. And really, not thinking even just Liberty, but there was no show out there run by an anarchist that was a tech show. I mean, maybe that's not true. There's believe it or not, there's actually a lot of guys in tech that are anarchists. I mean, some big names like Jacob Applebaum. He's a straight up anarchist. There's quite a few. I mean, crypto anarchy is a big deal, right? So, it was a niche, and a lot of people say that, is that you want to find that like niche blogging, or in this case, niche podcasting. And I think I found it, even though it's oddly enough, I was talking with Declan McCullough in Santa Cruz earlier this year, and, he was asking me about what I did, and I said I ran a tech podcast, and he's like, whoa, he's like, isn't that a little broad? What exactly do you talk about? And I said, well, yeah, but it needs to be broad. That's okay. So while I'm niche in the liberty movement, while Sovryn Tech is very niche in liberty and anarchist circles, it's actually not niche in its scope at all. And I'll admit, and please, I'm not trying to come off in any way, arrogant or anything, but it takes a lot of. You really got to have to run a broad scoped podcast. You've got to have a pretty broad scope of knowledge, and again, that's where I'm not trying to sound arrogant, like somehow, that, I'm just this incredibly smart guy. I mean, I am, I think, but I do have that broad scope of knowledge, which, another kind of inspiration for Sovryn Tech in a way that I want to present things is really based on Cosmos, the insanely popular and incredibly well done 1979 or to 81, whenever it was made. But anyway, the classic documentary series Cosmos, hosted by Carl Sagan. His style in Cosmos was, okay, let's talk about the new idea, let's bring in the history, then let's talk about where the new idea can go. And that's pretty much what I try to do with Sovryn Tech, because I readily admit that I am following a lot of his style, a lot of Carl Sagan's style, where I want to talk about that history. I love history, as Lanier says, history is a passion of mine. But then, I want to talk about what's going on, and then I want to talk about what it means to the future. So you kind of bring together all three tenses. Now I'm not saying that that's a style that can work with every subject, with everything that you want to talk about. I can't imagine a liberty-based podcast where that wouldn't work, because there is so much history, to the liberty movement. And I mean, there's a lot of history, that I don't even really get to touch on. Sometimes I get to touch on it when I'm hosting on Free Talk Live. But anyway, so that's where I'm coming from with how I wanted to do Sovryn Tech. I will add just a little bit more in that the reason that there's actually, because Sovryn Tech has hard breaks. It has breaks at set times. Sometimes I will edit those if I have a guest on and they want to talk a little bit more about a certain subject. I will, I'll stop recording and I'll move the breaks a little bit, but I generally don't like to do that. There are set amounts of time for each section of the show, which that was kind of unique too. I don't know of another show, at least not a show on LRN anyway, that has like specific segments that talks about things. And that was very early. I mean, right from the beginning, I knew that's how I wanted to do it. Is I want there to be specific segments, so that if people don't want to hear about a certain subject, they can skip right ahead. They know exactly where they are, and the time frames are all pretty much the same. Now, another reason for doing hard breaks, another reason for having the breaks built in. And again, I record the whole show live. Like, I hear the music. When you hear the music, I hear the music. Even though it's a recording and it's not, you can't listen to it literally live. I hear when the music comes, I have to end my thought. And I did that partly because it's training for perhaps future radio appearances. Of course, that's helped out immensely for me being on Free Talk Live. In fact, I was a first chair on Free Talk Live, which means that I was literally running the show. I was leading the show. And on Free Talk Live, now that is live radio, I mean, it's a podcast as well, but it's live radio, 125 plus markets, out there. And it was very easy for me to, when I started hearing the music on Free Talk Live, there's no second takes. If I really wanted to, I can do a second take with Sovryn Tech. There's no second takes on Free Talk Live. There's no second takes on live radio. And I could actually, I was easily able to, to deal with the fact as soon as the music starts hitting that I have to, I've got to end the thought or come up with a question. All of which, doing a year of Sovryn Tech totally helped out with. So that's something to consider. Are you going to personally, if you're doing a podcast, do you plan on personally growing, as a media personality or whatever, to where you could be in a new type of venue where you've got to be able to think on your feet? And again, that's another reason why I don't like to have a whole ton of notes, because, especially with Free Talk Live is just that, it's free talk. I mean, just talk about whatever you want. You can't take the time to pull up Wikipedia. You might have to answer, in a split second. And again, you're totally live. No second takes, no edits. So it's a good exercise. So if you're doing a podcast, I recommend it. I think it's a good way to do it, is to have heartbreaks. It gives you a moment. I mean, there's two thoughts on that. Some people like to be able to, just run on and let the podcast go as long as it can. There's guys like Stefan Molyneux, I don't think does any heartbreaks. He just he just talks and just lets it go. And some people like that. And there's definitely times where with Sovryn Tech, Sovryn Tech started off at an hour. It was only an hour long. Now it's 2 hours long, because I found that I needed more time. And you might go through the same thing where you evolve and you find out with the podcast that you just need more time. And that's okay. But I think it's a good idea to have it consistent, especially if you're going to be pushing it out to things like LRN.FM or No Agenda Radio or Nerdist, or, if you plan on going out to like other, to other venues, not just your own personal podcast hosting page, it's easy for them if you have a set time frame that you work within, every week. And I recommend doing that. And it helps you become a much better communicator, in my opinion, because it doesn't give you, an hour to just talk about one topic where you could, end up just rambling eventually. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with rambling, but, I'm just saying that I think it's more efficient this way. So that was very helpful to have the segments and to learn to use the hard breaks. It's really, really helped me out, growing, like I say, as a media personality. It's definitely helped with that. And so let's talk about a little bit. There's all the purposing and thinking behind Sovryn Tech. So let's talk about the technicalities. What exactly does Brian Sovryn use, to make this show sound so good? Of course, the initial point is that, the equipment I'm using is great equipment. And of course, it's all provided by the lovely and hyper intelligent Stephanie Murphy. She had her studio for pork therapy. And so I was able to just kind of walk right in, into this, really, really well done studio. And you can go to porktherapy.com and there's an About the Studio page there. And if you want to see what equipment she uses, you can get the full list. I mean, she did a great job putting this page together, and a lot of people have recommended it to look at. Hey, if you want to get started in this whole radio or podcasting thing, this is the good stuff. And it's up to you. I mean, obviously, Stephanie has an incredible sounding voice naturally, but fortunately her great equipment, just projects that even better. And I think it makes me sound pretty good too. A lot of times, but if you notice, a lot of times with Sovryn Tech, I am on location. And that location could be all over the place, or it could just be in the living room. And that, what I use for that, I actually have what's called a Yeti. It's by the company called Blue Microphones, and the Yeti can be had for about $100. And it's a great, microphone. It's USB. And it does a solid job, in my opinion. I think you can hear the difference. Usually I'll say when I'm on location, I don't always though, but I think you can hear the difference in podcast quality when I'm on the Yeti as compared to when I'm in the studio, like I'm in the studio right now. So that's something to consider. I think USB microphones do a fine job, albeit the quality difference. I don't think there'd be any problem with me using the Yeti, for the show forever. I think the quality is perfectly fine. There's another microphone. I'll link to these in the show notes if you want to check them out. I'll put a link to like maybe Newegg or Amazon or something. And you can check that out, and you can use the Amazon or the Newegg link at sovryntech.com to be able to do that. We'll talk about sovryntech.com in a minute. But anyway, so USB microphones I think work just fine, in my opinion. I listen to podcasts that I know are being done on USB microphones, and they sound just fine to me. I have no problem with it. Of course, personal opinion may vary. I'm open to that. If you think that, boy, the studio just sounds so good, I got to go with the studio, then go ahead. But be prepared, to hash out a few $100. For a great sounding studio, as to where with the USB microphone you could get away with spending one. There's a model by Samson that's really this nice portable model. The Yeti is kind of bulky. I'll admit the Blue Yeti, it is kind of a larger microphone. It can fold up very nicely. But in and of itself, like it's something that may not be the most comfortable for everybody to just constantly hold in your hand. While doing a podcast, as to where the one by Samsung that's a much smaller device, and it folds up really small, and I think that one runs about $60. So I'll link to both of those in the show notes again. So moving along, okay, so we talked about the microphones, we talked about the purpose behind Sovryn Tech, and maybe just some of the content. So let's talk about the website, right? And maybe some social media, because, and I don't want this to be too terribly long. I suppose I could have written up a blog post, but, I always debate on doing an actual blog. There's a lot of podcasts that they do kind of a hybrid thing where they are a podcast as well as a blog, and you can go to their website, in this case it would be sovryntech.com, and they kind of do both. I toyed with the idea and I kind of did it, but I didn't get any real response from it, and it's not from a lack of people. Like I said, we're in the high hundreds of the amount of people that actually listen to Sovryn Tech, and those numbers may actually be higher. I can't keep an accurate exact. I don't, there's no algorithm or data that gives you an exact amount. You can know how many people at least listen to the show, but I can't tell like the maximum amount because of, say, LRN.FM, and also the fact that there are pirate radio stations that push everything that's on LRN.FM, thus they push Sovryn Tech. And also there are other, internet radio networks that really just mimic what, whatever LRN.FM puts out there. So again, Sovryn Tech is being listened to. So I can't get an exact maximum amount of people that listen every week, but I can get a minimum. And the minimum is always at least 500 a week, 500 listens, individual listens a week. But I know actually it's a lot higher than that. Usually it averages to like about 800. And again, there's no really good way to keep track of the numbers of the amount of people that are actually listening. And, I got to say, other than a general idea of how many people listen, I wouldn't pay that much attention to the numbers, as far as how many people listen, because if you're not really doing the show for you, okay, another real reason that I'm doing Sovryn Tech is that, I want my voice to be heard. And I don't necessarily mean I want Brian Sovryn's voice to be heard. I mean more that, my opinions are not being represented out there. And I've gotten a lot of emails, a lot of listener emails saying, and even like I've had people walk up to me at various celebrity events and say, man, no one else says that. And that's pretty important. I think that's good. And so, maybe the reason you want to do a podcast is you want your voice to be heard. You want your opinions out there. And I've said this on Sovryn Tech before, that it feels so good, admittedly, to know that at least once a week, there are hundreds of people that are curious what I think about something. Because of Sovryn Tech, because I know how many listeners I have. And I really, again, can't appreciate all of you enough. It really means a lot to me that you do care, to listen and see what I say. And maybe you hate what I say. I've talked about that before too. You can fall into the Howard Stern kind of the Howard Stern effect, where people, he has these tremendously high ratings because people that hate him want to listen and people that love him want to listen. They both want to see what he's going to say next. And that's okay. It's like the old adage, there's no such thing as bad press. I agree. There's no such thing as bad press. And yeah, before I get into SovrynTech.com, into like website and presentation and social media, I think I'll talk about this a little bit more too. Sovryn Tech can't, I don't think, I haven't yet said it to Ian Freeman, and I need to. I've expressed to him, thank you for putting me on to, onto LRN.FM, which, by the way, normally he wants 6 months of material before he'll put you on. If you're interested in getting on LRN.FM, that's just a heads up that normally they want 6 months they want you to run for 6 months before they put you on LRN. Fortunately, I had a great relationship with Free Talk Live, and so after like only 7 episodes, he did let me on. Very early on. So, but that is kind of a unique case. That's not always going to be because the reason's logical, because he wants to know that you're not a flash in the pan, that you're not going to do a podcast for 2 weeks and then you're going to say, oh, forget it. And that's another, boy, we're just going all over the place here, but that's another important point to bring up when doing a podcast, is that you've got to put in that dedication. With LRN.FM, it has to come out, a new episode has to come out once a week. And if it doesn't, he's just going to, you get taken off. Now, and you have to have that dedication that even though Sovryn Tech only takes me a couple hours, and granted, there's some like show prep that gets done, beforehand, that maybe another hour, maybe 2 or 3 or 4, depends, that all varies. And sometimes I have to shake things up a little bit, and do some work on the website or whatever. But you got to do that once a week. Okay. And that is where a lot of people find to be the hardest part of doing a podcast, is like, you've got to have it out, by Saturday night, by midnight Saturday, you've got to have an episode out there. And I understand, and believe me, I get it. The idea of being busy, of not having the time, it's tough to really set that time aside. There's a lot of people that are, I've noticed a popular thing happening in podcasting right now is doing like news breaks, where essentially you just do a 5-minute news podcast, and maybe that's something you want to do, because that could let you get your opinions out fast or something, or at least bring light to the stories that you're interested in, so that's something to consider. But anyway, with a more full form podcast, we got all that. I want to say that, I've never thanked Ian Freeman for having Sovryn Tech on LRN, because you know what? I don't think there's any other platform that would have it. I tried applying for No Agenda. They said no. There's no, I don't think like, and boy, one of my dreams, if somehow through Sovryn Tech, or Free Talk Live, whatever, somehow, my engagements of being a media personality could get me onto onto This Week in Tech, oh man, that'd be a dream come true, no doubt about it. And if you want to help me out with that, actually, you can email Twit and say, hey, you got to have, this guy's amazing. You don't have to say I'm amazing, but you can say, this guy's great. You got to have him on Twit sometime. I would love that. But you know what? I don't think Twit would ever run Sovryn Tech. They have, Twit is an entire, it's a whole network based on technology-themed podcasts, okay? And they have NSFW with Brian Brushwood, which is a great show, and NSFW, of course, means not safe for work. And NSFW, they can get kind of, they get past a lot of the rules, and they'll swear and all this stuff, but they really, believe me, they don't go anywhere near the subjects that Sovryn Tech will say. They don't say half the things that I'll say. And I'm not meaning to brag on that. I'm just saying that if it wasn't for LRN, if it wasn't for having a program director, like Ian Freeman, that actually does believe in freedom of speech, and really does believe in liberty, Sovryn Tech would it'd be stuck on SovryntTech.com. It just would. It's too hot. And I mean hot as in like, the subjects are just, they're too taboo. The things that I say are often enough just too crazy. I get hate mail. Believe me, I get hate mail. People saying, what the hell are you talking about? In fact, recently I've gotten accused of, and I'm going to talk about, like I said, you're getting a double load this weekend. Okay. And I'm going to talk about this in the official episode of Sovryn Tech for this week. But I've got people telling me, oh, you're not a voluntarist. Fine. I don't care, but anyway, so my point being is that just, the show is just it really is. It's very incendiary. It's got thoughts that just no one else out there is saying, but I think that's a good thing. And I think in the end, now, if I parroted, kind of the quote unquote Libertarian Party line, who knows? Maybe I could, maybe I could have thousands of listeners instead of just hundreds right now. But then what are you producing? You know what I mean? Then it's like, okay, well, then I'm just doing Lou Rockwell's show version 3.0 or something, which, whatever. What's the point? I mean, there's a degree, I got to say this, there's a degree where popularity becomes stagnation. And where popularity, I could be the most popular guy in the world. I could, just go down and say, yeah, end welfare, woo, end it. I could say all these, crazy libertarian things, and then, tons of people would listen to me, and everybody would be like, oh, yeah, hey, you're great. But then I just, then how am I an individual at that point? You know what I mean? And that's what this is all about, right? Is being an individual. So, no, I mean, that doesn't mean that I say things just to be different. I don't. I say what I feel. But, I guess just for whatever reason, how I feel about things is just different than what's out there. But again, that's why, full circle, that's why I'm doing a podcast, because my opinion is not being represented. So, that works out. Anyway, sovryntech.com. Let's get on to that. So, Ian, if you happen to hear this, thank you so much for having me on LRN.FM, because I know no one else would. But let's talk about Sovryn.com, because, hey, if no one else will have you, you got to have a pretty engaging website, right? For people to want to go to it. Yes and no. I mean, there's something to be said for putting a lot of time, into a website. And Free Talk Live has an amazing website. I mean, just the stuff that's available there is positively mind-blowing, and I think it's great. I am in no way willing to put in that kind of time. Not that I don't have the knowledge. I mean, I can code I can code just fine. I'll say that. But I have no desire to put that much time into it like that. Nothing wrong if you do. Like I said, there is something to having having a very professional-looking, flashy website. That's okay. And maybe you want to do the hybrid thing where you're writing a blog and you're also hosting a podcast on the same site. If you want to do that, if you want that great looking website, this is going to sound like a plug, but seriously, go to squarespace.com. Okay. Use the promo code FTL11 and you'll get 10% off whatever you decide to get there. But Squarespace is definitely that is the place to do anything really on the internet. And I think you can you can host your show from Squarespace too. But as far as, this might be the most key thing, to do with, with a podcast is, okay, fine, I'm going to do a podcast. Let's say I've made the podcast, and we'll get into software for what software to use later on, but I've made this podcast. What do I do? Where do I put it? How do I host it? How do I get it out to the people? And I will say this, I mean, there's options out there. There's Podomatic, Libsyn, I think is the other one. But the one that I think is just, it's the gold standard, not that gold should be a standard, but the gold standard of audio hosting in general is SoundCloud. And you can go to soundcloud.com. And with SoundCloud, I mean, I think it's like $12 a month, and you get unlimited plays. You can only do 30 hours. So if you're planning on doing a podcast more than with episodes that are more than once or twice a week, you got to take that into consideration, because I think you only get, with the $12 plan, which is their pro premium or whatever, it's not their highest one. But with that, you only get, you only get like 30 hours a week, or a month. I'm sorry, 30 hours a month. So, there is actually a cap on how much Sovryn Tech can come out within those budgetary guidelines. Okay. And so you need to contemplate that, if that's something, how much audio content you're going to put out there. Because the next plan up, there is a plan that allows for unlimited, which of course is what Free Talk Live uses. Free Talk Live also is hosted on SoundCloud. I think it's like 70 or something a month. It's a pretty crazy amount of money, especially if it's something that you're not planning on initially making any money from. You can ask for donations, certainly. But it's to get enough donations to where, it's worth it for you to be doing it for 70 a month. I mean, that might be a long road that you're not willing to take. So anyway, with SoundCloud.com, there's a lot of options there. Let's talk about that for a minute. Okay. We talked, if you want to set up a great site, like I said, go to Squarespace. But as far as the actual podcast hosting, SoundCloud.com is just the way to do it. Now, the beauty of SoundCloud.com also is that it integrates well with, including Squarespace. Squarespace automatically, has like a great widget for SoundCloud to be integrated into it. But SoundCloud integrates well with Google+, with Facebook, with Tumblr, with Twitter. It does a great job of interfacing with all that. And we'll talk about social media in a minute, but SoundCloud.com itself is already a social media platform as to where people can get a SoundCloud account. And now they don't have to get a SoundCloud account. They can go to your SoundCloud page and, just listen from there, and they don't have to log in. They can be totally anonymous. It's fine, which is great too, especially for me, because I'm doing a tech podcast where people are interested in their privacy and anonymity. So SoundCloud, again, perfect fit. They can get an account, then they can follow you. And that's a nice boon, is to have an amount of followers on SoundCloud. And then also they can actually comment on the podcast at the timestamp where they're wondering about something or where they have a question. There's also a little messenger program built into SoundCloud. So SoundCloud itself does a really great job of encapsulating a lot of what you want to do. Okay. And actually I've eliminated the main website for SovrynTech.com. And other than Twitter, I don't have any other social media sites that I use for Sovryn Tech. Twitter's the only one where, and it's real easy, because when I post a sound to SoundCloud, when I post a show to SoundCloud, I just checkbox, where it says Twitter, and it'll automatically post it to Twitter for me. So I don't even have to do any work. As far as that goes, which again, that's, like I said, that's what I like to do. I want everything to be automated, simple, and elegant. And okay, so when I do that, that's all handled. It gets out where I want it to. Now I may share it personally, like on a personal Facebook page or on a personal Google Plus page. But that's just me doing it, for my own volition. That has nothing to do with how I'm trying to spread the show out there. And so I'll take a minute to talk about, social media in general and how that can be useful. There's a book out there, I've mentioned it on Sovryn Tech before. There's a book out there called Social Media is Bullshit. Okay. And I'm a little inclined, I'm kind of inclined to believe that. And in particular, I think it's bullshit for a podcast. Maybe if you're running a live show, it allows for some degree of interactivity, like Free Talk Live is very much into social media, especially like on Facebook, and people get to interact and they get to ask questions of the listeners, and then, they can read the responses pretty much as they come, or after a break. And so if you're somehow doing some kind of live show, which I don't know that I'd recommend right out of the gate, maybe get used to doing a non-live podcast first if you're interested. But I don't see any great benefit to using Facebook or Google Plus. Twitter, I see a benefit, because Twitter is all open and public. Everything's just out there. And Twitter is just an incredibly valuable resource for a lot of reasons. Now, while Facebook and Google Plus can also do hashtags now, Twitter is the place where people do hashtags. And so if you have a hashtag for your show and, people want to search about your show or see if people are talking about your show, you can create like a hashtag and just, and then people can search it and they can find it. And so Twitter is good for that, as to where like Google Plus and Facebook, people are usually like, they want to make things private and they don't want everybody to be able to see it. They don't want it to be public. So I don't think there's a benefit in using those, because they are so privately, they're so private. They're so closed off. It's such a walled garden, as to where Twitter is not a walled garden. It's quite the opposite, actually. So that's something to consider. I don't think the Facebook pages help. Some people will use, like I use SoundCloud as SovrynTech.com. I mean, you type in SovrynTech.com and that takes you to the SoundCloud page. Okay. Some people will do that with a Facebook page, where they'll say, and you might find that beneficial, and that's fine. If that's something that works for you, where Facebook is essentially your homepage. Especially when you're just starting out with a podcast. I mean, I recommend doing that sort of thing. The original SovrynTech.com I had was actually a Tumblr page. Now, I spent a lot of time. It was a very well-designed Tumblr page. It didn't look like Tumblr. It looked like a full-on website. And I had links where you could go to other social media stuff. But I could track how many clicks were on all of that with Tumblr. I could track, how many people were going to the Tumblr page. I could track all this data. And nobody was really using it. I mean, they weren't. The two spots where I was actually getting some degree of interaction were Twitter and just direct plays on SoundCloud or off the RSS feed. Which, that's another nice thing about SoundCloud.com too, is that it allows for, it creates your own RSS feed that you can push to iTunes, and it also. Now, granted, not every podcast app that exists allows for the SoundCloud feed to work. So you may have to run your SoundCloud feed through FeedBurner, which is run by Google. And so in that case, then you have to set up a separate link. Because again, the SoundCloud link, how it should work is that when you put in like the web address, the actual web address for my SoundCloud page is soundcloud.com/SovrynTech. And you should be able to put that into a podcast app, and then it'll create the feed. But it doesn't always work with a lot of different apps and some software. So that doesn't always fly. So you might want to set up a FeedBurner account, and then, just run your SoundCloud feed into the FeedBurner and then copy that FeedBurner address. And what you can do, again, one of the nice things you can do, like I said, nobody was using Tumblr. Nobody was using Facebook. Not really anyway. I mean, likes, yeah, maybe I'd get 5-10 likes or something, but I mean, that's not worth the time, And with Google Plus, like I said, the main reason I was using that was to somehow reach out to an international audience. Just never happened. So, again, and I don't know, where the fault lies in that. Maybe I just wasn't, marketing right or something. But anyway, with SoundCloud.com, at the bottom left, you can actually set up links. Like I have affiliate links down there right now. I also have links for the Twitter page, and I have a link for an RSS feed. Now you can only set up like 5 or 6, maybe 7 links, so you're limited there. Okay, but again, my point in bringing that up is that SoundCloud.com really gives you everything. I feel, unless you want to do this hybrid business, where you're doing blog posts or sharing pictures. It really delivers everything I feel that a podcast needs. Just right there, and so what happens is you go and you hash out $10 a year for a domain name, not a domain, just a domain name like SovrynTech.com, and and you have that get directed. Use like Dream Hosting, or you can use GoDaddy or something. But GoDaddy I'm not a big fan of. So anyway, and then you just have that direct to your SoundCloud page, and there you go. I mean, and the presentation's there. You can put your logo in the top right, in the top left. and you can put your links, your affiliate links, as well as links to your other social media. If you are going to use social media, those are available there to just input in, and SoundCloud just makes it all so easy. So again, it's the premier way to do it. $12 a month is a great deal, as long as you're not doing more than 30 hours a week, or 30 hours a month, of audio content. It is the way to go, and it works so well. But if you want to do a web page, like I said, Tumblr worked. Tumblr accepts a lot of it was a really nice web page. I'm sure some of my listeners may remember it, but I wasn't getting a lot of visitors to it. But I mean, I could post the show and it looked really, really nice. And I even had like a widget on the right side for my Twitter feed. So it would show my tweets right on sovryntech.com, which again was just a Tumblr page, and it's totally free. So Tumblr, I know a lot of people, Angel Clark uses a Tumblr page. I think Daryl Perry uses a Tumblr page as kind of a secondary main page. But you could use it as your primary. I think it's a fine idea, to do is to just, set up a Tumblr page. And with that, you could do the hybrid too, where you could actually type out a blog post and put that on there. A lot of options with Tumblr. There's no reason, in my opinion, that you can't do a great podcast and the monthly expense be, only like $12 a month. There really isn't. So anyway, that's my thought on the web pages things. I mean, the main thing you're trying to feature is the podcast. You want people to listen. So I don't see a whole lot of point in setting up a really, really like gorgeous website. I mean, it can definitely lead people in, but especially when you're just first starting out, no real need to do that. I might do one in the future. I don't know. If I do, it'll definitely be through Squarespace, just because like their uptime is, 99.9999999%. You just can't take down a Squarespace site. So that's my thoughts on that. But again, I think if you just had like a SoundCloud page and you had your links on the bottom left, SoundCloud looks so professional and so good enough, and people realize that you're actually putting your money where your mouth is when you're using it, that I think that makes a statement enough, in my opinion, for the genuineness and the heart being put into a podcast. Okay, so we talked about web pages, talked about the equipment used, talk about kind of the reasons for doing a podcast. I can talk about the software that gets used for it. Everything is done in Audacity. I've yet to really mess with. Now, Audacity, I've featured it on Sovryn Tech before. It is a cross-platform. It's one of the most cross-platforms pieces of software out there. You can use it on Linux, which is actually what I'm recording it on right now with this. I'm using the latest version of Ubuntu, and I have Audacity running, and it's great. You can use it on, like I said, on Linux. You can use it on OS X, but there's something else if you're using OS X I want to talk about. But you can also use it on Windows, and the other advantage of doing it on Windows is that if you have, like, say, if you're going to like a shared studio, which is becoming somewhat of a popular thing in New Hampshire, like there's LRN Manchester essentially, or it's the In Your Head Studios, I think is what Dale calls it. And other people are allowed to do a podcast from there. I understand in the past, Ian has a lot of podcasts that get run out of his studio. And the nice thing about Audacity is that it can be portable. And so you could have, a USB hard drive, and you could put Audacity on there. You could use like portableapps.com, which I've talked about in the past, a great software suite that is portable, that runs totally off a USB drive. And as long as you're walking up to a computer that has either Windows or a Windows emulator like Wine on it, you can, thus you could run it on OS X or Linux. You could have, your own personal Audacity with your template set up. That's what I was talking about earlier, was the template, how the music runs at set times and all that stuff. All that gets done in Audacity, and I have all the sounds set up in Audacity, and I hit record and it runs, and I can see in Audacity when the break is about to come up, which is very, very handy. And so you wouldn't have to mess with someone else's computer, is my point. If you use Audacity and use it portable, you could go up to any machine and kind of record from there. and is like if their mixer's hooked up to it, you can choose the mixer in the Audacity setup. There's a little bit of a learning curve to Audacity, just a little bit of a one. Trust me, it's not big at all. And you could, and it works great, and it's open source and it's totally free. You can't beat it. So Audacity is what I use for recording. Now, if you are using a Mac though, or even if you're just doing it on an iPad, which that's, I've talked about that on Sovryn Tech, where, I think Apple is planning on everything going to, they're pretty much going to eliminate OS X and everything's going to go to an iPad. There won't be any more laptops. Everything will be iPad. And it's not a bad idea, in my opinion. I think it's a great idea because the iPad is just a solid piece of work. But if you're using OS X or iOS, you have GarageBand for free. And GarageBand is just hands down the best audio production software in the world, in my opinion. There's like Logic Pro that's a little more involved. It's certainly better as far as like the options go. But as far as ease of use, and just like feature rich, GarageBand blows anything away. If I had an Apple in front of me right now, I would not be using Audacity. I'd be all over GarageBand. It is so damned good. So that's something to consider. And, that's something to think about too, is that while we're talking about software, if you plan on doing video or putting your show up on YouTube, I know a lot of podcasts that only exist on YouTube because it's totally free, right? And they'll just like, they may not record video of themselves doing it, but they'll put like pictures up or something like that. They'll make a picture video essentially and put it up there. That's a totally viable option. A lot of people do that. And I used to have a Sovryn Tech YouTube page, got very little views, very, very little, maybe 20 or 30. And I don't consider, unless I'm in 3 digits on something, I don't consider it worth my extra time, because it added about an hour of development time to release, over an hour considering upload time, to release a video, just a simple video, with pictures going by and memes and all that stuff, with my, with the Sovryn Tech audio in the overlay. It took forever, to really do that. And so I didn't consider it worth the time. Now, if that's the only place you're going to be, then you could do, you could do a podcast for free, as many hours as you want, because there's no limits on YouTube. So that's something to consider. If you do want to do video, bottom line, if you're going to do a whole bunch of really creative media production for your podcast, the point I'm bringing to you right now is to, yes, use a Mac. Okay. Because Apple just has, there's a reason that it's the creme de la creme amongst creative professionals. Because, now I don't use one, but then I don't do video either, not really. So keep that in mind. If you are looking to do a multimedia powerhouse with your podcast, you might want to get into the Apple ecosystem, because that's where it's at. But anyway, if you're not going to use Apple, and if you are, you want to use iMovie if you're going to do that kind of video production. But if you're not using Apple, and you're using Windows, you want to actually use the Windows Movie Maker for Windows 7 and down, because that allows for really, really easy making of YouTube videos, and video recording and all that stuff. It's totally free, and it makes things very, very easy. But that's when I did make picture videos of and posted on YouTube of Sovryn Tech. That was what I used. I used that to make the whole thing, and very, very simple, very intuitive. It has a nice, you can input however many pictures you want to go by in the picture video, and then there's like a button that says fit to music. And so when I drag my MP3 in, it would instantly make all the pictures, just equally match up in time with the video. So that's a great way to do it. Nice and simple. And if you already have a Windows machine, you're all set. So that's that. But I feel like I have to, 2 points I want to make on this. One is that YouTube is just this really I mean, it's enjoyable to just watch some YouTube videos and some stuff that's on there, no doubt about it. There's a lot of great documentaries and things like that. But YouTube, as far as an interactive space, I consider to be positively toxic. It is so toxic. The YouTube comments are insane, and I would not want to subject, I mean, like I said, I can deal with getting some hate mail, right? But I would not want to subject myself to the YouTube comments, and I usually make them so they disappear. Now, I mean, Google recently has made it so that you have to have a Google Plus account to make YouTube comments, and thus there's some, like, people can't speak perhaps with so much anonymity anymore, which I don't mind the Google Plus YouTube comment thing, but then again, I don't care about YouTube comments. But I really don't think YouTube is that great of a venue. Also, mentally, when you're just doing a podcast on YouTube, I think people instantly think, now, this doesn't mean that what you're saying isn't important, and it may be some of the finest words ever spoken on the planet Earth. Okay? But I think people will feel you're cheap, and that you're not putting your money where your mouth is for your production. Now, if you're just doing video, I mean, of course, no one can think you're being cheap, because YouTube's the only place to really do that. You're not going to go and hash out thousands of dollars for bit gravity every month, or like, then there's, some people use Ustream. I think Ustream is kind of a mess. I'm not a fan of it, that there has to be ads that you don't have a choice on that'll just come up out of nowhere. So I don't recommend using that. If you're going to do video, go ahead and do YouTube. But my point being is that if you're just going to completely host an audio show onto YouTube, and if you don't have the money, then yes, please do YouTube. If you can't afford the $12 a month, by all means, do YouTube. It's okay. But I'm just saying that I think mentally a lot of people, unconsciously or consciously, are going to think, yeah, there's not a whole lot of value being put into this, So that's just my my thoughts on the whole idea of, like, what software wise, what it takes to make video. Again, audio, in my opinion, your options are Audacity or GarageBand if you're in the Apple ecosystem, and definitely preferable to use GarageBand. But as far as, something I've looked into recently is possibly doing audio production on Android. And I have yet to find the software. There's Voice Pro. There's some other ones out there, but I haven't found the software. Like iRig has some nice apps out there, but I haven't found the software that allows me to input a template that I can edit on the fly if necessary. So unlike GarageBand on the iPad, Voice Pro or any other software, any other app for Android will not allow for that full production suite that you get with GarageBand portably, onto Android. I have not found that yet. When I do, believe me, I will talk about it. So, because I'd love if I could just do the whole show from my phone. I think that'd be awesome. If I could do my whole show from my Galaxy Nexus, that'd be great. But as yet, that hasn't come into fruition. So let's see, what other subjects exactly should I bring up as far as doing a podcast? Well, we could talk about the email. In the post-Prism world that we're in today, when I started Sovryn Tech, I actually went through Hushmail. I've always made sure I was using some kind of encrypted mail solution before Prism. After Prism, I consider it a necessity to set up an email system. If you want to even put up like your PGP key on your website, or put it into your show notes or something, which is, I need to explore doing that option for Sovryn Tech. I'll be inputting that very soon, because that way, emails are encrypted. I think you need to seriously look into that. Now, I use riseup.net for my email now. Hushmail was fine. There was nothing wrong with using Hushmail. It was totally free. riseup.net is totally free as well, even though, it is good to donate to them, because they are a nonprofit, and, they run entirely off of donations. But yeah, I recommend using some kind of encrypted solution, even if it doesn't say, like, I really think it's okay if your site, if your email address, like my email address is not questions@sovryntech.com, which generally is what you'd want, right? And that's okay. If you want to take the time to set that up, that's fine. But I think if you did it from a standard of like, say, it's Sovryn Tech at hushmail.com, you're making a statement. By using Hushmail, by using RiseUp, you're making a statement that, encryption is important to me. Privacy is important to me. And I'm using the companies that allow for that. Or again, you could use GMX. I totally recommend using GMX. I think mentally, like the YouTube thing, using a gmail.com address comes off as cheap. Comes off as not a lot of effort. Again, if that's what you got, that's what you got. It's okay. Especially if like you're setting up the whole YouTube thing, then go ahead and use the Gmail address. It's already built into the account you made for the YouTube, page. But I'm just saying that in general, I think that comes off as kind of cheap. So even if you use something like GMX, that kind of makes a statement that no, my email will not be based on servers in the United States of America. Because we're talking about Liberty shows here. And so, you kind of want to make Liberty statements with that. So, no, you don't have to have, yourshowname.com as your email address by any means. But if you're not going to have that, I recommend using something that makes a statement all the same. And again, maybe think about putting in, put in a PGP key into your show notes. That's another nice thing SoundCloud.com sets up is, it creates a great venue for your show notes, and your show notes look pretty good, on pod-catching apps. And okay, so we talked about a little bit about email. Now let's talk about donations. What I've always done is I've actually just put in like the QR code. I did this in the past. I've done it twice where I had a donation model and I didn't have a donation model. Now, Sovryn Tech originally didn't take donations because I didn't want anybody to think that when I reviewed something, because, quite a few minutes of the show is reviews of websites, movies, or, products, whatever. And I didn't want anybody to think that like somehow those were like bought. Like that, I wanted it to be clear that those are my opinions. Now, of course, that's a pretty high standard to hold, a pretty high ethical standard to hold for yourself when you're just starting out, and you've only got a few hundred listens. So, but what happened was a lot of people said they wanted to donate. And so I set up a donation, with Bitcoin. That way it's anonymous unless they told me, which is fine, but so, you can set up donations through like PayPal. There's a lot of different services. In fact, if you're using Squarespace, there's some really nice built-in services for donations. So that's something to consider, but it's not an area I really wanted to deal in. Initially, I had no interest in donations being done, but so many people have said, please, let me help out the show some way. And so I set it up. And so now, Sovryn Tech has just pretty much what I did. And I've done this before, where within the picture, the symbol for the show, I put the QR code and the physical address. And I recommend putting in both. Put in a QR code and the physical address, because not everybody's going to go up with, with a QR code, up to their computer screen. Maybe they're just going to type it out in their wallet software that's already on their computer. So have both. But yeah, I put in a QR code and an address for Bitcoin. I put up a QR code and an address for Litecoin. And this is a little ahead of time, but you're going to hear about this in the next episode anyway this week in our double load of Sovryn Tech. But there's also a PROTOSHARES address for Sovryn Tech. And I'm not going to go into right now what PROTOSHARES is, but it's a cryptocurrency. But anyway, I inputted all those, and recently what I'm doing, starting with this episode actually, is in the show notes, there will be the address, typed out, there will be the address for Bitcoin, Litecoin, and PROTOSHARES. So, that's something else you can do too to make it nice and simple. Take advantage of your show notes. Put the links in there, put whatever information in there, put the email address in there, put the websites that you're running in there. Like mine has sovryntech.com and sovryntech.com and twitter.com/sovryntech are all in there. So that, go ahead and do that. That's cool. So yeah, take full advantage of your show notes, please. Anyway, so as far as, making money off of it, also you can do affiliate links. Amazon is a pretty much a no-brainer to do an Amazon affiliate link. There's a Newegg affiliate link you can get. All of those are no-brainers to set up. You can set up affiliate links with lots of things. You can set up one with Firefox. I have one set up for Firefox. You can get one set up for like Sprint, where and I have all of these. I have, I have an Amazon link. There's a Newegg link, and there's a Sprint link. To where it's and SoundCloud lets you input these really nicely, and it's just as easy to do it on a Squarespace page as well, or on a Tumblr page, where you can just set up the link. They the company Sprint gives me a link, and when someone clicks on that and they go and they get a new contract with Sprint, I get $50, and so do they. They get $50 too. So it's a great everybody wins. There's no reason not to do these things. And there's never a change in price. Usually a person just gets more value out of using an affiliate link. So set up your affiliate links. I definitely recommend that. The ones I listed off are really good ones to start off with. Pretty much everybody has some kind of affiliate links. As far as advertising in general, beyond affiliate links, I do have some advertisers that I do. I'm doing a live read, like right now. I do live reads for Nomad Capitalist for an event that he is holding, which is Passport to Freedom. And there's a link for that, and of course that's an affiliate link as well. So you can do live reads for things, and just you can do it for free if you want. I think it's good to have like some kind of fun ads. Ads is one of the things that I was actually thinking about. Another reason I wanted to segment the show is because I wanted to do some interesting ads, and I do some funny ads. Like I produced the ad for where it's just like it's playing Jermaine Stewart's "We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off to Have a Good Time." And it's just funny, and it breaks up because, Sovryn Tech, especially in the first segment, sometimes can get really, really serious. I can get really, really heated up, and it breaks the mood. It resets the mood, when I hear that. And I hear it, just like you hear it. Because like I said, I record like I'm doing a live show, even though I'm not. And then you can do ads for whatever. Like the ad I am most proud of is the ad for Babylon 5, which I made myself. Based on an old ad from TNT in the 90s. And I totally did that to be an asshole. I just, because I'm like, okay, supposedly there's all these nerds around me. Nobody's seen Babylon 5. What the hell? And, and I'm very, very passionate about Babylon 5. And so, and I'm not kidding. When the ad says it's the greatest show in television history, I think it is the greatest, and I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people in the industry that definitely feel that. I think it is the greatest show in television history. And so I made that and I put that in there, just to kind of, admittedly to kind of be a jerk. I made another ad. Again, it was based off of an ad from the 70s. I put in another ad for Battlestar Galactica, the original Battlestar Galactica. And admittedly, I kind of did that to be an ass, because I can't stand the new Battlestar Galactica that Ron Moore did. So ads allow you to express yourself, as well as allows you to have perhaps some revenue come in. I do there's some other ads that I put in there just for just as a favor per se, and there's nothing wrong with that too. But hey, you get a big enough audience and you sell it off to people that, hey, we'll put this ad in here, and I'll run it on my show. Then good, and you can do ad trade-offs. A lot of people do that. That's another thing too, is where, okay, like I'll run an ad for your podcast and you run an ad for my podcast. You can just. It's not a rev share. It's not what's considered a rev share, but you can do that. I'm probably going to be adding on Adam and Eve, adamandeve.com as a live read into the show. So yeah, the sirens just went off, and like the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy said, here come the sex police. But anyway, you can set up with a lot of these sites, with a lot of these things, you can set up where you share advertising, and there's value in that. But do make sure you're getting some kind of value. So, and hey, maybe your show will get big enough to where, again, this is if you put in actual ad breaks, into the show, which I recommend doing. You don't have to. Not everybody does. But you can make some money off of this whole gig, or you could have people, you could do some kind of, there's setups where you can have recurring donations, and then you get recurring donations. And hey, even if you only made like, $30 a month or something, or $20 a month, that's not bad. It's $20 you didn't have for something that you should be doing out of fun. So why not, get a little money out of it? I see no problem with that whatsoever. I kind of had a personal thing on it before, but I've really gotten over that. And like I said, so many people have wanted to donate to the show. In fact, in tech journalism, there is a rule that, like in fact, Leo Laporte he won't buy stocks in tech companies. Because he feels that is, that's against his journalistic principles, because then he may be, unconsciously, he may be promoting, talking good about a certain company like Google or something, based upon the fact that he has stock in them and he wants to see them go up. So I find that interesting, so you may have some personal rules, and they're fine too if you have personal rules. I don't see any harm in a lot of this stuff, but if you have some kind of personal rules as far as, where you don't want to take money from or something like that, hey, they're your rules. It's okay. Go for it. That's totally fine. So I think I've covered pretty much everything I want to cover as far as like how Sovryn Tech is made. Like I said, I spend, maybe 5 hours tops on a regular week, messing with Sovryn Tech. 2 hours recording, about an hour, getting everything, barely an hour, maybe 40 minutes, whatever, but I'll just round it up to an hour of, compressing the sound, getting it uploaded to SoundCloud, and getting all the show notes put in and everything. And then, throughout the week, maybe a couple hours of reading various stories. And even that's pushing it, because, I'm interested in the tech world, which is part of the reason I do a tech podcast. And so a lot of the stories that I talk about on Sovryn Tech, come my way naturally because I'm reading about them. Or I get a lot of stories because I do tech roulette, from listeners who send me stories. And I have tons of those, and that's so great. All right, let me talk about that for a minute too. I don't want this to go too much longer. We're already over an hour, but I want to talk about that real quick too. Try and interact with your audience. If you're not going to do, I think social media is kind of crap, and it's not something that's meant to last. And the kind of social media that I think is meant to last is like Instagram or Vine, and you can't really interact, in my opinion, with people like on Instagram like that. That's just a totally different animal from somehow promoting something that really is, like a personal thing. So, but find ways and be creative. Find ways to interact with the audience. Like interacting via email is really, it's a great way to do it. I loved when I added in the listener email section. That just took off, and I thought it was so good, and I'll never get rid of that. And tech roulette, where I do stories that get sent to me, that's awesome, because not only do I get to talk about what you want to talk about, which is important to me, but also, honestly, it saves me some time, because the stories come to me, instead of me having to go out and look for them. So, which is great. That's an excellent symbiotic relationship. So again, you have, if you can interact with your audience, go for it. That's going to grow listeners. It always does. And everybody feels good about it. I feel good when I get to interact with my audience. I feel good. I even have some audience members on the show as guests. And if you can do that, that's great too. In fact, all right, there's another topic. Having guests on. Having guests on over Skype, I've had great guests on over Skype. I've been very, very pleased with those shows. As far as doing the show over Skype, I hate Skype. And actually, Skype recently is there's a piece of software called Pamela that works with Skype on Windows, and there's other software options out there that do this, where they can record your Skype calls. Those after December 2013, those will no longer work. So what you have to do is you have to do what's called a hardware solution to be able to record Skype or Google Hangouts or something like that. That, you know, if you're interested in doing that, I recommend you looking into that and seeing, you know, where you're comfortable as far as that goes. But having guests on over Skype is not as easy as it once was, or at least it's not going to be very soon. But I don't so much like doing it over Skype. I like having the person in the studio. That's something for you to consider, because you might need multiple microphones if you're going to have guests on. You know, but I like having guests on. I enjoy having listeners on the show. You know, I think that's a lot of fun, and I hope to be able to still have more in the future. But I definitely prefer having a person in studio and interacting with them right in front of me. That is the best way, you know, to have a guest on. And, you know, the nice thing, too, in the Liberty Movement is there's a lot of people, a lot of big names in the Liberty Movement who will gladly come on your show for free. They appreciate, you know, that they have a respect for the effort you're putting in for doing a podcast, and they will come on, you know, even if you only have a few listeners, they will, quote unquote, you know, I don't mean this derogatorily, but they will humor you, you know, and be on your show. And I think that's just wonderful. The tech world has a lot of people like that too. So, you know, both nice areas to be doing a podcast in. But yeah, guests are a great way. Having guests on, especially big name guests, is a great way to get new listeners, because what they'll do is, you know, that guest, say like Jeffrey Tucker or whoever, or even Stefan Molyneux, will say, hey, I was on this show, and then everybody's zoom, you know, they're going to run over to your show. They may not listen to any show other than the one with your guest on, but there's a pretty good chance, I think, that they're going to find out what what your show is like, and they may end up loving it. But of course, you know, to hit this point home, in the Liberty world, you know, in Liberty media, you have to anticipate and consider the problem that you may sound like 20 other shows. So keep that in mind. You know, I think you got to make something that just comes off as unique. You know, maybe you're a unique personality, and that can be enough, but, you know, could contemplate that, you know, or you have very unique ideas, and that could be enough, but contemplate that. But if you're going to, you know, generally, you know, run the standard anarcho-capitalist line or whatever, or atheist line, you may want to consider, how can I make the show different if this is what I'm going to say? I'm not insulting you for saying that. I'm just, you know, I'm not insulting anyone for wanting to do that. I'm just saying that if you're only going to deliver a little bit, you know, the kind of the more usual stuff, you know, with cops hurting people and all that, consider a unique way to present that. You know, it's just some advice on my part. You know, and like something I think that's starting to become popular are YouTube videos where someone talks. You know, and just like, it's like a shot of their head, and they just talk, and they make like little pop-ups maybe occur around them. I've seen a lot of these, and let me just a recommendation, please. Again, I'm not trying to insult, but just a recommendation. If you're a straight white male, don't do it, because there's so many, and they're so damned boring, and they're so like, it's like, oh wow, you have thoughts, you know. And I'm not saying it's bad to be a straight white male, okay? I'm just saying that there's just so many out there. You know, you are really going to get lost in the, you know, even if you're part of like some kind of community, and, you know, built-in community, and you do that, then you're just going to be preaching to the choir anyway. And like, I'm just saying, think a lot about why you're doing this. And, you know, now don't be different for different sake. You got to have reasons. You know, if your voice is unique, you should know the reasons why it is. You know, if what you're saying is unique, you should know the reasons why it is. Okay. But really, I think that that's an area where you're just going to flounder. Is this, the straight white males with hats or something, or not hats, and just, talking head on YouTube, not going to happen. If you're a woman, by all means, please do it, because A, I want to hear your voice, and B, it's a good showing, because how many people, how rampant is the meme that, this woman's only into Bitcoin because her husband is, or this woman's, she's only into liberty because she's the girlfriend of a liberty activist or something. How common is that? It's terrible how common that is. So please, if you want to break that mold, oh baby, do it. Please. I am behind you 100%. In fact, contact me, sovereigntech@riseup.net. I will promote the shit out of you. Or even like Kathy Reisenwitz, she has a great blog, Sex and the State. Oh man. I did that for Website of the Week in no time. Her video, please, I will support you there. But, and again, I don't mean this as insult. I'm just saying, if you're the straight white male, just stay away from doing YouTube videos, because there's nothing there. Okay. All right. Anyway, moving right along. I think that pretty well covers everything. If you want some tips, please, you can email me. I don't know if I'll get back to you right away. Again, I'm exceptionally busy. I do get quite a few emails, but I read every single email. Please understand, I read every single email. I do not mean to ignore you. If you feel you're being ignored, I apologize. But I read every email, and and if you have questions about, hey, I want to start a podcast, what do you think about this idea? Go ahead, email me or direct message me on Twitter. It's fine. I may not get to you, but, it doesn't hurt for you to try, right? Not to say that I'm somehow some kind of expert, some kind of an expert on making a podcast. But this is how I do it. I hope you found it interesting. If you have any other questions, like I said, go ahead and email me. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to say on the matter. Thank you all for listening to Sovryn Tech. I really, really appreciate it. I'm glad people enjoy it. I get a lot of nice emails, which usually start off with love the show, yada, yada, yada. That's literally what they say. And I know what you mean by that. Go ahead and tell me if you have critiques. Always accept critiques from your listeners. Do not get mad at your listeners. In fact, there's no point in even engaging, I've gotten some emails that are pretty offensive at times, and there is no point in fighting fire with fire with them. Just give them some compassion and take it as a critique, as to what they're wanting to hear or what they are hearing that you may not be wanting to say. So, email is very, very important. Interacting with your audience is very, very important. And I try to do that on Sovryn Tech. If you don't feel I'm doing a good enough job, please email me. Let me know. Okay. I will not get mad. There's no point. So thank you all for listening. Again, double load. So don't worry. The newest episode, the freshest episode of Sovryn Tech is already out there, just as well as this one is. So carpe lucem. I'll see you on the other episode.
This has been Sovryn Tech. Visit us at sovryntech.com. That's SOVRYN tech.com. There you can connect with us, see more of what you've heard on today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is open source. We encourage you to share. Later, nerds.